guys, Kelly here, and today I want to share with you some of my recent reads. All of these books were ones I read during the Thrillerathon, which was hosted by Harriet Rosie. That was last week, so they're all thrillers. And the thing with thrillers and reviews is that thrillers are really subjective for each person on what makes them a good thriller. You know, some people like a lot of twists, some people like to make sure that they don't predict what happens, and there's different tropes that people like. So I'm going to tell you what I liked about these and the basic synopsis, and you can decide if it's something that you might want to pick up. But if I didn't like a thriller, doesn't mean you wouldn't, and vice versa. The ones I really love, maybe you wouldn't like either. But hopefully it'll at least give you some ideas of some of the thrillers I read and whether they'd be something you're interested in. So I'm going to start with the one I like the least to the one I like the best. And so the first one is Emma and the Night by Wendy Walker. And this is a story about two sisters that 3 years prior went missing. The case was never solved. And then at the beginning of this novel, in the first chapter, one of the sisters, the youngest sister, returns home. And so this entire book is kind of the story of what happened to the sisters during the 3 years. And we hear, it's two perspectives. So we have the perspective of the sister that returned, telling the story, and then the other perspective is an FBI, well, she's an FBI agent, but she's like a psychologist. So she's kind of reading into what's going on in the mind of this girl. The thing I didn't like about this book is that even though we are hearing from two perspectives, both perspectives are all focused on the story that the girl is telling. So when we're hearing from the girl, we're just hearing her story. When we're hearing from the FBI agent, she's just saying, listening to the story. So she's just saying like quotes from what the girl said, or actually physically sitting in the room and listening to her. And so all of it is that girl's story. And so it's a case for me of like, I really enjoy a story that's show not tell, and this is all tell, because nothing is happening in current time. It's all the story that happened before, and like what parts of the story are we believing her? Is she a reliable narrator? Do we know? You know, that kind of mystery, and we're kind of just seeing unfold what happened and all that. So there's just not really a lot happening. That for me, it was just too much of just listening to a story, and I just didn't really enjoy that, so I gave it 2 stars. But some people really like that. If you are somebody that doesn't mind to just listen to the story, unravel what parts of the story you think are true. I did give it 2 stars instead of 1 because I didn't guess the whole ending and what the conclusion would be. So I do think there are some surprises to be had in this book. It just wasn't a style of story that I particularly enjoy. And then the next one is Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. And you know, she's obviously a very popular thriller author that all of her books involve like really messed up characters with dark stories. And I think they're all female. Yeah, they're all like female characters in their 30s that are probably like, you know, alcoholics and have issues and stuff like that. That's a lot of what happens in her books. And so this one specifically is about our main character who is, I think she's from Chicago, and she's a journalist, and then there's a story that happens in her hometown where she grew up. So her boss sends her to her hometown, which she hasn't been to for years, because a year ago a girl was kidnapped and then is killed, and then now there's another girl missing. And so they're trying to like see if it's like a serial thing or whatever. So her boss sends her to her hometown to write about it. And in the process, she kind of is investigating the missing or the disappearances and the murder and all that. So she's kind of trying to solve the crime at the same time. And this one, I gave it a 3.5. I did enjoy it, but I almost feel like weird saying I enjoyed it because it is a very messed up, dark story. So if you are somebody that doesn't mind that, if you've read other Gillian Flynn books or other really dark thrillers and you don't mind like really messed up family situations and characters, then I do think this is an interesting read. But it may be, like a lot of times it may feel really uncomfortable because the stuff that is happening in this is all just like really messed up situations. And even like, oh, I don't think there's any character in here that shines any kind of light on the situation. It is all like messed up people. And I enjoyed in the fact that like, I felt like there was a lot of twists and turns, that we were really getting to know a family and their issues. So it wasn't necessarily a surprising ending or anything like that, but it was more of, like, I was surprised at how depraved the people were in the book, and so that kept me, like, kind of intrigued and immersed during the whole story. So as long as you don't mind a dark read, I did think that was enjoyable. And then my next one I really liked, and that was the last one by Alexandra Oliva. And this one I gave 4 stars. I kind of wish I could have given it more. I'll tell you why I gave it just 4, but I was enthralled in this and really enjoyed it. And so what this is kind of a post-apocalyptic thriller. So this story is about our main character, who throughout the book is called Zoo because she works with animals, so that's what her nickname is, Zoo. And she has entered into a reality television show that is kind of like Survivor mixed with the show Alone, if you know what that survival show is. So it has kind of the survival thing in the fact that they compete like challenges and stuff like that, but it's also kind of like Alone, where there are times when they are left alone in the wilderness to survive. Maybe they're just with one other person, put on a team, and so there's a lot of like survival stuff of getting their own food and water and making shelter and all that stuff, but then also challenges thrown in, kind of like Survivor. So it's a mix of that, but with a really big budget, so like a lot of things are occurring on the show that maybe haven't happened on a reality television before. And then at the same time that she is in this like survivalist show, in the real world, a pandemic is breaking out. So people are getting sick and dying, and it's happening at a massive rate. And so in the book, we're following two like timelines. So we have where we're following kind of the beginning of the production of the show, where we see some of the challenges, we see the interviews with the contestants, so we kind of find out who's on the show. We see how they are going through their day-to-day on the show of like surviving and solving these challenges. And then alternating chapters, we're hearing from Zoo in current time, which I think it's about like a month and a half or so after the show has started, and she's completely on her own, and she thinks she's just on a solo challenge, because the show has like group challenges and solo challenge. So she started the solo challenge, and it's like when she goes off on the solo challenge that the world is falling apart. And the thing I love about this book is this mix of like the weirdness of reality television shows and how much is scripted and how much is just like manipulated to make the audience interested but isn't really what's happening. And then the other part is her thinking she's still part of the show, but then there's a real crisis happening and she doesn't know what is part of the show and what is real life, and it's that blur between reality television show and real reality. And I just found it really entertaining of like following her along and kind of not knowing what is real, and then us starting to realize what's real, but she still doesn't know what is going on. And I just found it really enjoyable. This I would kind of think is similar to Station 11 because it does have that post-pandemic feel, except for that the pandemic is happening at the time of this and is the direct afterwards instead of like many years in the future. And I did like this better than Station 11 because the problem I had with Station 11 was there was just too many perspectives, where in this one we are focused on just Zoo's perspective. And I liked that because we really get to see what it feels like for her to survive and to be alone in this like world that she doesn't know what's happening. So I just found this really entertaining. I also would say it's kind of like Station 11 in the fact that it's written very much in that like literary fiction style. So it took me longer than a normal thriller to read because it was that really dense writing that is more like literary. So if you want like a fast, snappy thriller, I wouldn't say this is like fast to read, but I was like really enthralled and wanted to keep coming back to it. So even though it might have taken me like 4 days to read instead of like the 1 to 2 days of another kind of thriller, like this thriller, you know, I might have read in 2 days really quick, like it speeds through. This one just kind of had more dense writing. But if you're somebody who likes literary fiction, this might be a thriller that could get you into thrillers. We're still having that literary writing. So yes, I really enjoyed it. And the reason I gave it 4 instead of 5 was because there were sections in the middle that got very repetitive because, you know, we are following this woman like basically on her own and kind of meeting the same situations of what would be happening in this survival situation, her trying to find water, trying to find food, building her shelter. You know, it does get kind of repetitive there in the middle, but then the last like 100 pages really picked up again. And this is only actually a 290 page book, so that's why I feel like I maybe should have given it a 4.5, because that repetitive part is really not that much, because the first like 100 pages were really getting a lot about the like beginning of the shows and into the characters, and the last 100 were like nonstop. So it's really just like that, maybe, you know, 50 or so pages in the middle that kind of dragged. So I'm not quite sure. Maybe it'd be 4.5, but I really enjoyed this and would recommend it. And my last book that I really enjoyed was Confessions by Kanae Minato. And she is a Japanese author, and this was translated into English, I believe. Let's see, it says the translator is Stephen Snyder is the translator. So if you are somebody that wants to read more translated work, this is a translated work. And I loved it. I listened to this on audiobook for most of it, actually, and it went by so quick. And this story, you don't want to hear a lot about it because of the way the thriller unfolds. You don't want a lot of details, but it just centers around, at the beginning we are hearing from the perspective of a teacher of a middle school. I think it's like around 5th grade, maybe 6th grade, her students. And while she's like teaching there, her daughter, who's 4, comes to school towards the end of the day because she's done with her school, and she kind of hangs out on the middle school grounds while waiting for her mom to be done. And one day the daughter is found dead, and so all this story is revolved around the death of this teacher's daughter. And so this story is written from multiple perspectives, so every chapter is a different person, and there are only 6 chapters in this book, so they're really big chapters, but I like how each chapter is really dedicated to a different person's view on the situation. And what I love about this is that this book is kind of like a observation of what happens when one event happens, and then we see the trickling events that come from that event. So we're following these 6 perspectives, and each one we're adding new things that happen. So there are times when it's a little repetitive because they might talk about the same event over again, but we're seeing it from a new side and seeing like what that person did that then changed the course of events, and then the next person did something that changed the course, and it just keeps going till like one action can lead to a multiple of others, and it becomes like a whole ripple effect. And I was just like enthralled with this story and how it was going to turn out and what was going to go on in these characters. I really enjoyed it. If you want a quick thriller that'll just keep you involved, I wouldn't necessarily say keep you guessing, because the point of this isn't really to find out a solution. It's more just to see this one situation from a lot of different eyes and see what each person is motivated to do when something tragic happens in their life. And I just found it really enthralling. I wouldn't suggest this if you were somebody that doesn't like to hear about kids that are, well, first, you know, a child dies, and we see that happening multiple times throughout. But then we also, that some of the other perspectives are kids themselves, because they're like the middle schoolers. And so if you're somebody that doesn't like to hear about kids having bad thoughts and like doing bad things, then I would avoid this. But I really enjoyed all of it and just thought it was a great read. And so it's 5 stars for me. So that was my favorite of the week. It's also my first one for Thrillerathon. So it set off on a good note. So those are all of my thrillers. If you've read any of these, I'd love to talk to you about them. Or if you have a thriller that you would really like to share with me that you think I would enjoy, put it down in the comments. And I always like to have new recommendations. Bye!